Hello, and welcome to this Explore Analytics video. Today we're going to take a deep dive into lookups. Lookups are a really powerful function for when you want to build a report that references data across multiple tables. So, for example, in incident management, you may have pieces of data that are scattered across ServiceNow tables or scattered in data sources that are outside of ServiceNow. For the example we'll look at today, we're going to look at incidents, their related CIs, and CI class mappings in a spreadsheet, but there's really a breadth of data that you can pull together using lookups. If you're building a report against one particular table, for example the incident table, and you want to be able to pull in a column from one of these other data sources, that's where lookups become really powerful. The other example we're going to touch on today is in project management. Again, when you have portfolios and individual projects and risks and issues, and you want to pull that information together into one report, you can use a lookup. In this case, we're going to go through an example that pulls together projects and portfolios with data from risk and from issues. But again, this is going to be something that you can use across any data source and any table. So what is a lookup? A lookup allows you, from a list report, to look up an associated value on another table. So you're going to want to use this anytime you need to pull a value into every row before aggregating. So for example, if there's additional reference data that you want to have that will enrich the report before you do further analysis, a lookup is really powerful for that. But I think it's a little bit easier to understand when we look at a specific example. So let's take a look right now. So let's say that the question is that we want to answer is, how many CIs do we have by a category? Now, CIs are broken up into classes, and there are many, many different classes. But instead, we're going to map it to a category using a spreadsheet that's already been uploaded. So this is my report that's looking at CIs by class. And then with the lookup, we're looking up based on that class to find the associated category and displaying that back in this report. That's what's going to allow us to very easily get that information together. The way that the lookup works is you can see this text function here. We're going to create this function, and the first value we're going to pass into it is the value. That's the field that we're using on the table we're running the report against to look up to the other table and pull the data. So in this example, from the incident table, we're going to use the class column to look up onto the CI category mapping to display the category. The next parameter that we're going to pass in is what data source we're going to look up on. This is the real power of the lookup, is the fact that you can point not only at other tables within the same data source, but also to other data sources. In this case, we're passing through the Explore data source, which is the data source for spreadsheets you've uploaded into Explore Analytics, as well as trend tables. So we're going to say, use the class column on this incident table, and look into the Explore data source to get the lookup result. Next, we're going to say, give us the table. So we're going to say which table that we want to look up, and which key field are we going to match to value. So in this example, we're looking in the Explore data source, looking at the CI category mapping table. That's that spreadsheet that has mapped the CI classes to categories. And then we want to find the row based on a key field that matches this value we're passing in. So in this case, our spreadsheet has a column called class that we're matching to the class that's on the incident table. And then lastly, the value field is the field you want to display. So these are the 5 components of the lookup. We're going to pass in a value, which is going to say, this is what we want you to look up in the target table. And then look in this data source for this table and match the value to this key field and return the value field. Let's take a look at this in practice. I'm going to switch over to Explore Analytics. Right, so this is the report that I'm starting from. This is an incident grouped by CI class. But as folks who've familiar with ServiceNow, you can see that there's a lot of different classes, and this is messier and more granular than what I want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this into a list report, and we're going to pull in the configuration item class field, and I'm going to relabel this to be class. So now I can see here the class. Now I'm going to pull this calculator field. So this is going to be the calculated field for our lookup, and we'll call this category, or CI category rather. Now from the function tree, these are all of the list calculations that are available, and we're going to select lookup. And you can see it lists for you the 5 parameters that we discussed on that slide, but I'm just going to click here and click this double arrow in order to pass that in. You can also type into the calculation field, but I like to just pull from the menu. Now for the value, we want a field that's on this table, so I'm going to select that class field that we added to the list and click the double arrows. In single quote, we're going to type in Explore to tell it to look to the Explore data source, comma, and then we're going to, in single quote, tell it to look for the table CI category mapping, single quote, comma, and now we're going to get, and we can look at this again, that key field. So in this case, we want it to be the one that matches to the class, which on this spreadsheet is called class. And then the last one will be the value field, which is what we want to display. And in this case, that's category. So the lookup is going to take the class field, go to the Explore data source, find that CI category mapping table, and find the row that has the same class as the class on this table, and display the category. And as soon as I click OK, and now I can see that here is the CI category. Let me actually move it next to the class so that it's easy to see. So now I can see that business service is mapped to business services and applications, server to infrastructure, end user computer to end user device, mass storage device to storage. Email server is also business service and applications. So we're really mapping this down. Now this example is really an example of where you're using this lookup and mapping table to consolidate a lot of options into less. Now, this is great for just displaying that information, but in Explore Analytics, we have something called a composite view that allows you to build a report on top of this. So we'll call this incidence by CI category. And now it's going to treat that table with the calculated fields, including CI category, as if it was a table within ServiceNow. So now I have that map table, and I can switch this to be a chart and select this to a pie chart. So now you can see that we have a lot fewer categories than we had classes. It's still showing the same information. It's still drillable and everything that's there, but we're presenting it to the user in a much more user-friendly way. This is a great example of a use of the lookup function that actually comes directly from our CMDB data quality application. You can find out more about our CMDB data quality application in that video. But this is a great example of how you can use a lookup to pull data from another table or another data source, use it to map the information and present it to the user in a great way. In this case, because we're using a spreadsheet, we didn't even need to make changes to ServiceNow in order to do that mapping. So let's go back to this for a moment. There's another type of lookup that we have available, which is called the Lookup Aggregate. You can see here that this is a list of projects, and we're doing a lookup, but instead of displaying just a single value, we're aggregating. In this case, we're counting the number of rows. So for example, this aggregate is going to the risk table and counting how many risks there are associated to this project, or how many issues there are. You could do something similar with a pivot and a mashup, but in this case, this is good because it allows us to present that information inside of a list context. Now, if we take a look at the way the function is defined, I'm not going to go through piece by piece because it's basically the same as a lookup, but with the slight change that after you say which value you're looking up, find the data source table and key field, and then pulling a field that you want to aggregate, the question is, how do you want to aggregate this? So in this case, it's counting the rows, but you could, for example, pull the average number of reassignments or the minimum or maximum values you want to bring. But I think count is a very good example. So we're going to take a quick look at this example. It'll be very quick because we've accomplished something similar already. So this is my list of projects, and I can see here the number of risks, but let's add that aggregate for issues. So I'm going to use the calculator field. I'm going to look up the lookup aggregate, select that function. We're going to pull the number field. Now, one thing I want you to notice is that the number field is actually a hidden field in this report. So we added it, but we marked it off as hidden so that you can use that for the lookup, but you don't need to display that to the user. And then as we did before, in this case, we'll select issue. And then the field that we're going to match that number to is actually called parent.number. And we want it to bring the sys ID. And we want it to count rows. So this is that lookup aggregate. We'll call this issues, and it's going to bring us back the number of issues that are associated with this project. Right, so we can see that this has 1 issue against it, and this one has 3. Again, we're able to easily do that. Now, one thing, this example is from the project management application. And one of the things that we did in the project management analytical application was we made this a URL that actually goes to a tab in the dashboard that brings up the number of risks. So if I show you how that works on our project management dashboard, you see that here we have the number of risks and issues. And if I select risks, it takes me to the risks tab and lets me go from there. So you can see how we're using, along with some other functionality, that lookup aggregate as a way of showing at the aggregate level and then getting into the details that are associated with that. So now the last thing I want to show you with lookups is filtering based on lookups. So the filter works conceptually similar to the lookups that we're doing now, except rather than pulling that information to display, what we're going to do is we're going to filter this table based on the values in another table. And again, just to review some of these concepts, we're going to use the category mapping that we did in the first example to do the filtering. So if I go back to Explore Analytics, and I go to the report that we created. So this is the full list of incidents that is the input of that composite view we worked on before. I'm going to select filter data. And now we're going to say we want the filter the configuration items class, because that's what we're going to use to look up. And now instead of equals or not equals, there are these functions in lookup and not in lookup. So again, that's going to use the lookup for filtering purposes. So we want to say, okay, lookup, and you'll notice that the structure is similar to the structure that we had in the code itself. First, we select the data source, then we select the table, in this case, CI category mapping. And then we want to, what field do we want to map to that field from a lookup perspective? So we want to match the CI class to the class on this category mapping table. And then we want to filter to say, show me just a particular subset of these categories. Show me just business service, infrastructure, and end user device. I'll click Apply Filter Changes and click OK. So what this is doing is it's filtering the incident table based on a mapping that's in a spreadsheet outside of ServiceNow. So we're using that same concept, only in this case we're filtering. So because we have that lookup, we can actually see the value, but it doesn't need to be displayed. But what we're doing is we're filtering to only these appropriate categories, and remembering that this is not an incident piece of information. We're just filtering based on that. And now when I go up to that top level in view, you can see that the composite view we've built on top of that is now reflecting only these three categories that we filtered onto, and what that is for this data set. Thank you for watching this video. If you're interested in the two analytical applications that we mentioned through this video, those are pre-built packs of reports, the project management and the CMDB data quality applications. There are videos describing both of them on this channel. You can also view the combining data video for some other Explore Analytics strategies for combining data across multiple tables, or just explore the channel for other use cases and ideas. Good luck and enjoy combining together your different sets of data.